So what happens to all this? Well, one thing Nano said was, you sisters should be willing to go anywhere in the world to save souls. Guess where they went? Dakota Territory. 1880, 100 years later, 1880, Dakota Territory. What's Dakota Territory look like? Dakota Territory look like? Well, people were starting to settle. You know, Europeans, they start on the east, southeast. They come from Iowa and places, and they're moving in and settling in Dakota Territory. And then, by then, the federal government had established the west half of Dakota Territory for reservations, so the Indians were pushed into the west half. But the gold rush happened at that time in the Black Hills, so we had pioneers also heading for the gold rush. So this is Dakota Territory. A bishop, poor guy, was assigned to this territory to take care of, you know, to teach whatever. I always think he needed to teach the faith, but he probably also needed to teach a little bit of a humanity and human dignity. If you think of what would go on in the gold rush, who would go to the Black Hills for the gold rush? It'd be like the Bakken oil fields in North Dakota when you hear some of those stories. It'd be a little worse than that. Well, anyway, so he needs help. Well, he didn't go to the trading posts of the day, and he didn't go to the Warren Buffetts of the day, and he didn't go to the Steve Jobs of the day. Guess who he went to for help? The nuns. So off he goes to Ireland to look for nuns. Well, 3 of them were spiritually foolish enough to say yes. Now, can you imagine leaving Ireland in 1880, spending, you know, 3 weeks or whatever on a ship, you know, probably throwing up over the rail every other day, and getting to New York and finding a train to St. Louis, and then getting on a riverboat and coming up the Missouri River. The story is they lost their luggage in the Missouri River, and getting off at what then was Wheeler, Dakota, Lake Andes area. They got off and started a mission there among the Indians. There were Indians there who helped keep them alive over the winter. In the spring, their sod house collapsed in the rain and the thaw. Things didn't, you know, uphill, Melissa, uphill, it was uphill. They went to the Black Hills, and because Red Cloud's band was out there, so the bishop coaxed them out to the Black Hills. They go to the Black Hills, didn't work. No church, no sacraments, wild town. You can imagine what a gold rush town would look like. So they came back. Fargo heard about them. Somebody from Fargo coaxed them to Fargo. They didn't go back to Ireland, although that was thought about. They started in Fargo, and then there was a priest in Aberdeen. He recruited some down to Aberdeen. They come to Aberdeen. Frontier town. Now we're 1886. Here's where entrepreneurial passion really took over. They started a school there, and they needed more help because immediately little towns around there heard about sisters and started to coax sisters. We want sisters. So, never to say die, Mother Joseph, who was the head sister of that little foursome, goes back to Ireland and talks about 10 young women like you to come over here and do this foolish thing that they had done, and they came. Well, within 11 years, now listen to this, folks, within 11 years, those Irish girls, women, young women, started 9 schools and 4 hospitals. Entrepreneurial spirit, passion, crazy. Let me tell you about St. Luke's. St. Luke's was the first hospital. 1901. Now the sisters had just been there 3 or 4 years. 1901, diphtheria epidemic in Aberdeen. Everything shuts down. Frontier town. Everything shuts down. They must have had a doctor there. They said to the sisters, would you take in the diphtheria patients? Oh, sure. It'd be like, would you take in the Ebola patients? Sure. Just bring them in. Bring the cots. So they did. Move them into the school and move them into the sisters' dwelling, and they took care of them, probably helped a lot of them die. I mean, diphtheria, no medicines. Well, anyway, when it was over, the city folks intelligently scratched their heads and said, you know what, we ought to have a hospital. How we get a hospital? Those 4 nuns, darn it, we need a hospital. Would you do this? I don't know where the risk manager was, but they're teachers. Sure, go anywhere in the world to be of service. This is what Nano told us to do. We must be faithful to that. So they said yes. So they started St. Luke's Hospital. And then within 11, 9, 10 more years, Mitchell asked for a hospital. Holy Rosary in Miles City, Montana asked for a hospital. And McKinnon in Sioux Falls, 1911, asked for a hospital. And so they start hospitals. Well, where do they get the nuns? Well, Mother Joseph, every couple of years she'd go back to Ireland. Sometimes she brought as many as 19 women back. I figured by the time they got to McKinnon Hospital in 1911, they had about 60 to 70 Irish women, young women, who came to be sisters and do this missionary work. But think about what this cost and the dedication they had to have. There's no money. At one point they had $1.09 in the bank. When they first built, when they'd start a hospital, here's how it worked. The town would give them a piece of land, and typically there might be an old building on the land, and they'd go into that and start a hospital. And then when they got going a little bit, then they would try to raise some money and build a hospital that looked like a hospital. When they built the first St. Luke's, they had $1,009 in the bank. How did they do these things? Well, anyway, most people, they didn't get billed in those days. People came and got taken care of, and maybe they paid something, and maybe they brought a chicken, whatever they did. That's what they tried to get along and live on. And the sisters begged to try to make this. The sisters did everything in the hospital. They were the cooks, they were the housekeepers, they did maintenance, they were the nurses. Oh, by the way, very soon after they started the hospital, one day there was a woman knocked on the door of the convent. And, well, can I help you? And you said to me, I'd like to be a sister. And I said to you, well, who are you? I'm an Army nurse. Well, you come right in. Now we can start a school of nursing, which they did. They started a school of nursing right away. And so within 3 years, they had trained nurses, whatever that looked like in those days. But do you see the spirit of this? They hit the 1920s and 30s, you know, the history of 1920s and 30s, stock market crash. It was like 2008, except much worse. The stock market crashed. We had the drought, grasshopper plagues, crop failures, more patients, no money. 175 banks failed in the region at that time. 40% of the people in the Dakota region were on welfare, on relief rolls. You know, you ever seen the movie pictures of them lined up waiting for a piece of bread? That's what it looked like. And the sisters are hanging on to those hospitals and schools. Entrepreneurial passion and ambitious spirit, yes. Okay? I like to think of it this way. When you found your place, when something the world needs done meets up with what is in your heart that you need to do. That's the story of those sisters. They found their place when something the world needs doing, even if it's cupcakes. Something the world needs doing meets up with that thing in their heart. I noticed both Melissa and Aaron saying, there was something in me that wasn't enough. That's where it was with these women. That was the Lord's Spirit, and Melissa is very conscious of the Lord's Spirit even working in her business. So don't overlook that. That's so important.